Tonight we're going to be talking about Brainscan, directed by John Flynn. Tonight's cast is Edward Furlong, Amy Hargreaves, Frank Langella, T. Ryder Smith, and Jamie Marsh. A teenager named Michael is introduced to a new horror CD-ROM game called Brainscan. The goal of each level is to take helm of a serial killer and kill off a new victim within a set time limit, usually about an hour. Little does Michael know every move he makes within the game is actually influencing events in real life. Talk about war games. The tone of this movie starts off pretty grounded, carries a very Twin Peaks-ish type soundtrack, gives backstory of how Michael's parents aren't really a part of his life, and does show a bit of sleaze with Michael stalking his next door neighbor, Kimberly. Probably the only thing they could have cut from the movie while still conveying his crush on her with other future scenes. But I am saying that with a modern lens. Nonetheless, it was just something I didn't really dig. The first 30 minutes of the story is probably my favorite, rounding up to the first kill scene. It's all taken as a grounded horror movie prior to the Trickster being introduced, the entity behind the Brainscan game. Once the Trickster appears, there's a tonal shift to horror comedy. The Trickster is a devil on your shoulder type character that influences and tempts Michael to continue playing the game, carrying a very similar vibe to Howie Mandel's Maurice and Little Monsters, except there's something very Ziggy Stardust about him. Maybe a hint of trash from Return of the Living Dead. I wish there was a bit more mythos surrounding him. There was slight ambiguity that he represented Michael's alter ego before confirming again that he's a separate entity. He's meant to be the biggest comedic element of the film, and I only wish they leaned more into that. I'd much prefer the story revolving around a wisecracking villainous mentor over the Trickster simply being Michael's inner psyche. Visually, this movie carries a very early low-budget 90s grit. I always loved seeing Michael's room covered with horror and band posters, physical media, and all kinds of trinkets. The set is almost portrayed as a lair, with Michael representing some sort of tormented genius with his own Igor, elevated up above to show he is the overseer of his neighborhood, potentially foreshadowing that he is the classic monster of this story, staring from afar from his castle. I really enjoyed the POV sequence of the first kill. It's exactly this type of tone I think of when I hear the words 80s or 90s horror movie. It feels like we're witnessing something we're not supposed to see. The comedy lands just fine. The special effects are very fun to watch with that particular blue lightning cheese. And gosh, big shout out to Jamie Marsh because the character of Kyle is the best part of this movie. He's an incredibly wholesome best friend that everyone should have. Buddies forever. There's a scene towards the end where Michael says I love you to Kyle, and because it's the mid-90s, I did anticipate a homophobic joke of sorts, but Kyle just accepts it because he knows what their friendship means to them. Ultimately, Michael's arc may have been to learn that he was getting in his own way. Instead of having a dry attitude who allowed to think the worst of himself, he began to accept love by the end of the movie. With no paternal or maternal figure in his life, he was tempted to entertaining the Trickster as someone to look up to, the representation of hedonism. Taking what you want by force and not caring what others think of you. And if they think you're a jerk, well, you've already accepted that you were a jerk a long time ago. And you probably deserve every hate comment thrown at you. It isn't until Kimberly reveals she's always liked him too and he's just being himself that he's able to separate himself from the Trickster. That was the catalyst of embracing the love he was oblivious in already having with his friends and himself. Basically, he found people that matched his freak. Again, I only wish the Trickster had a bit more lore attached to him. I really enjoyed the grounded tone prior to the Trickster being introduced, but if we're gonna go with a comedic villain, we should go all in. I also wish we could have had one more POV kill sequence within the game, because aside from the first one, plenty of the kills end up being completely accidental. My critical rating is 5 out of 10. May not be as palatable to bigger audiences as this is a particular niche of horror that you would need to have been a part of the culture for a while to understand the vibe they're going for. My personal rating is 7 out of 10. I could definitely see this being a comfort movie if I had grown up with it, or maybe within time it might become that for me on a rewatch. On average, it's a 6 out of 10. I do wish this was a little higher, but this is the most accurate I can be when recommending it to new viewers. A fun ride, definitely worth a watch if you're into 90s horror comedies with emphasis on a fever dream-like vibe. I'm glad this grew into a cult status as it's overdue for some love and recognition.